Thank you for tuning in to Entertain the Geeky, your source for nerd news.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Jason back at you with more nerd news. So we've had it's been a little bit of time since we talked. I had a week off last week, so we got a lot of stuff to go over. I'm going to start with some movie stuff. So a rumor from Bleeding Cool has come about, and Rich Johnston from Bleeding Cool has said that his source is reliable when it comes to this type of information. But at the moment, this is just a rumor, so take this all with a grain of salt. But supposedly, Marvel Studios is working on an Eternals film for their upcoming Phase 4 slate. And this could be pretty interesting. Eternals was an old Jack Kirby creation from back in the day with the gods and various other characters. We've already seen some of the Eternals within the Marvel Universe make their debut in a movie. So obviously Thanos is an Eternal. Ego was a Celestial or an Eternal. They called him a Celestial in the movie, but typically Ego is one of the Eternals. The Grand Master and the Collector are both Eternals. So it's just kind of an interesting slew of characters that were kind of these gods, these ancient beings of the universe. And we've also seen, some ancient forms of them in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So, for instance, the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie showed us Nowhere, which is the skull of a giant celestial from long ago. We also saw one of them during the Collector's presentation to the Guardians about the Infinity Stones. So there's already precedence within the Marvel Cinematic Universe for this kind of story. It'll be interesting to see, what, if anything, from the comics kind of gets adapted. What, if, anything from the movies, any characters that we've already seen from the movies will make their debut. And if they'll tie this into Adam Warlock, who's supposed to make his Marvel Cinematic Universe debut in Guardians 3, which we already know the date for. So could be, they could be setting it up there and then maybe letting James Gunn kind of have some creative input, as he's been kind of their go-to guy for the galactic universe with the Guardians of the Galaxy and some of the other characters that he's introduced. And definitely teasing Warlock at the end of the second Guardians of the Galaxy film. So we'll see. Like I said, take that with a grain of salt, because it's just a rumor at this point, but Bleeding Cool does have a history of getting things right. In other movie news, it looks like the Russo brothers, who are directing the upcoming Avengers Infinity War and the fourth as of yet untitled Avengers film, have said that this fourth Avengers film will kind of mark the end of the arc they started Captain America on in Winter Soldier. So Joe and Anthony Russo have been with us since Captain America Winter Soldier. They directed that film, then they directed Captain America Civil War, and now they'll be working. They've done these final two Avengers films that are coming out this year and early next year. So what they have told us is that this had a definitive arc for the characters of Captain America and Bucky. And that as we come to Avengers 4, the path that they started on way back with Winter Soldier will finally see its conclusion. Now, speculate as you will about what that means. Personally, I think it means that we are going to have the death of Captain America's story play out on screen, and we will see Bucky pick up the shield and kind of carry on in Steve's name. Now that could be, that is just my own speculation. That could be wrong, but I feel like, we definitely know Chris Evans is not going to be playing the character anymore. He made that announcement to us. And so he could know this because there is a finality to his character's arc, which probably will end up with his death. But we do know that Sebastian Stan still has some movies left on his contract. So could we see a trilogy of Captain America films come out of Phase 4 that star Bucky as the titular character? Who knows? I think if we're following this story from its original inception in Captain America Winter Soldier, moving through the third Captain America film and into these Avengers films, it seems quite likely that that's where Marvel is leading us. But it's just speculation at this point. So fingers crossed. I'd love to see Bucky pick up the shield and carry on as Captain America. I mean, I've mentioned that before on the show. I think Sebastian Stan is great, and I think he would do a great job with the character. In other Marvel Studios news, it seems like that's kind of dominating our headlines this week. Black Panther has officially gotten its Blu-ray digital release dates announced. Black Panther came out back in February and obviously has just been shattering all the records it's come up against. It recently crossed the $1 billion mark, which only a few movies in history can say that they have done. So this was a big one. They kind of let it milk its way through the theaters as long as they could because it just kept making money. I mean, it was dominating every weekend after it opened, no matter what was coming up against it. But we have some details announced for the release. It will be coming to us digitally on May the 8th and on Blu-ray and DVD May the 15th. So I know I'll be up there getting my copy of the movie. I hope you will too. I can't wait to sit down and watch Black Panther again and kind of get to critique it and look for some things that maybe I missed in the multiple viewings that I have watched it. In other movie news, the Hellboy reboot that is coming out, that stars Stranger Things David Harbour as the titular character. We've seen some announcements out of it. One of the big things is a banner went up that shows some Mike Mignola art of Hellboy and the Blood Queen. And like I said, we've seen some casting out of it. We know that David Harbour will be playing Hellboy. Ian McShane has joined the cast. He's going to be playing Professor Broom. And this little bit of information, we knew that Milla Jovovich was going to be in the movie as well, but there was still some questions about what character she would play. And it seems very likely, if this teaser is any indicator, that she will be playing the Blood Queen. And if you're unfamiliar, in the comics, the Blood Queen, her name was Shenmue, and she was a powerful witch who lived in ancient times, King Arthur's time, the time of the Round Table and King Arthur's court. And she was taught magic by Merlin. So her story is rooted very much in that old time, but she went insane and started worshipping the Ogre Jihad, which actually made their appearance in Guillermo del Toro's first Hellboy film, but they're a big part of the comics as well. But this madness led the other witches to murder her, and then centuries later she was resurrected when an entire village of slaughtered people's blood was poured into her tomb, and obviously she became the Blood Queen. And part of her kind of ancient lore with King Arthur's court kind of came back around. At one point during the comics, Hellboy got his hands on Excalibur and used it to raise an army of Arthurian knights to battle Shenmue. And the Ogre Jihad, who she worships, transformed her into a dragon for this battle. So that was kind of the big, arc for her within the comic world. And how much of that will actually make its way on screen is yet to be seen. But the fact that they're kind of leaning in the direction of some of the more comic, kind of fantastical comic elements, I think is good. We do know that this movie will be rated R, which will set it apart from the other, Hellboy movies that had Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro directed them. So it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm very much looking forward to this. Neil Marshall will be directing it. And again, it will be R-rated, so it seems we can go a little bit darker with some of the source material, maybe tell a Hellboy story that will actually please the fans that may or may not have enjoyed the PG-13 Del Toro films in Hellboy and Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. I didn't really have any problems with those films. I think that they took too many liberties with the source material. and kind of took the focus off of some of the characters that I think could have used a little more focus, specifically the elves in the Golden Army, which are a very big part of Hellboy comics. Really just didn't get their due on screen, I think. But hopefully this new movie will change all that, and we'll get a new kind of brutal representation of the comic world. So switching over to the world of television, there's a few things that have come up. We'll start with Gotham, which just recently kind of brought the story of Jerome to a conclusion. And if you're unfamiliar, Jerome was, a psychopath within the narrative that it was just kind of always heavily implied that he was going to be Gotham's Joker. Which again, I've spelled out my thoughts on Gotham before. I really just think it's hard to do a story with the villains that doesn't involve Batman, because the comics have always shown us that the reason that these villains exist is because Batman exists. He escalated the situation. But regardless, they kind of pulled a little bit of a bait and switch on us, because they kept telling us that Jerome was not the Joker. Jerome's not the Joker, even though he was being groomed to be the clown prince of crime for this television show. I mean, he looked very much like the Joker. He got his face cut off and reattached, similar to Snyder and Capullo's run of New 52 comics when they did the Joker, the Death of the Family storyline. So, recently, and spoilers ahead for Gotham if you have not seen it, they introduced us to a twin brother to Jerome named Jeremiah, who, Jerome in his final moments of life, he dies, and post-mortem he had a package delivered to Jeremiah, and when he opened it there was a little jack-in-the-box in it, and he started winding it and got sprayed with gas that was intended to release the madness within his psyche. And he has a classic moment that harkens, back to Batman the Killing Joke, the comic book series, where we see him kind of just grappling his head and busting out into raucous laughter. And I guess I'm happy to finally see the Joker, but it seems like such a goofy way to get there, when we already had the character of Jeremiah, who just should have been the Joker. And I guess the actor who plays him still does get to play the Joker, so I guess technically they didn't lie to us when they said Jerome wasn't the Joker, but it just feels a little unearned. And with a reveal like this, I really just expect this show to very quickly get to Batman's reveal. I mean, the kid who plays Bruce is still very young, a little too young, I think, maybe to be Batman. But we're getting to a point where enough is enough, and we've got all the villains. The whole rogues gallery has just popped up, and we have Hugo Strange, we have Mr. Freeze, we have Firefly, which is a very obscure, older villain. We have Catwoman, obviously, we have Riddler, Penguin, Mad Hatter. So, so many of these characters now have created a situation where GCPD just can't keep up with the number of villains that are popping up, so it seems like a good time to introduce Batman. Now, whether they do that as part of the series, or whether they kind of just bring the series to a conclusion with that moment, similar to how Smallville did with Superman, is yet to be seen, but my patience is wearing thin. I think that it's about time we get to Batman. Keeping with the TV thing, we finally got our first look at the rest of the lineup for the new Teen Titans TV show. And I'm going to say, when I saw Robin and when I saw Hawk and Dove, I was pleasantly surprised with how these characters looked. I think they looked really fun. Their costumes looked very functional, and great for a television show. But then this week we got our look at Beast Boy, Starfire, and Raven, and my confidence went right out the window. They just look very goofy. They look like, kids in bad cosplay of the characters. I mean, in all reality, we've seen people cosplay these characters that have looked better than these TV actors in their costumes. And truth be told, we could just be seeing, these are on-set pictures, so there are people that are clearly supposed to be playing these characters, but they're plain clothed. So we could be seeing, something that is not very indicative of what the final product will be. But if this is what the final product will be, I gotta say, my opinion has changed quite drastically about what this show is, because these characters look terrible. Beast Boy, he has green hair, but he himself is not green. And Beast Boy should be green. Raven looks like, she's the daughter of a demon. She should look terrifying, and she looks like a sad little emo girl. And Starfire looks like an exotic dancer. There's no really better way I could describe that. She's got big high heels on, big leathery looking coat. She's got the hair, the orange hair that is Starfire, but everything else about her just doesn't really seem like a hero. And what we saw of Robin and Hawk and Dove are these heroes in costume, and the costumes looked great. And these new looks at these other characters that are clearly main characters in the story they're just kind of sad. Not really sure what to make of it, but I will reserve my judgment until I see the final product, because again, I was intrigued initially, and I will still give it a chance regardless. But here's hoping, fingers crossed, that the Teen Titans TV show is not in trouble already. So we also had a new revelation come out of FX's Legion series, and I have not been following this series, but I have been keeping up on the plot lines and the things that it's kind of doing, and I probably will check it out eventually because I've heard really good things. But one big thing that popped up in this last episode was a mention of the Shi'ar, which are, if you're unfamiliar, an alien race from the X-Men comics, who were part of the Big Dark Phoenix saga. They've been a part of, the Kree-Skrull War. They're just an alien race that is, their princess Lilandra was friends with Charles Xavier. They even had a relationship in the comics. She helped them to walk again. So that's a pretty big, stamp on Legion that it is clearly and kind of firmly secured within the X-Men universe. There have been little mentions of other characters, and there have been connections, not really direct connections, but kind of more indirect connections. But this was a direct reference to the Shi'ar. So, again, I have not checked out the show, but the evidence keeps piling up that I clearly need to, and to find out what they've got going on, and what they might be bringing to us in the future. So I'll be definitely keeping a close eye on this, and keeping you guys up to date on that stuff as it happens. Switching over really quick, we've got some. This month has been kind of slow with video game news. We've got God of War coming out on April 20th. We'll be sure to get back to you with some more information about that as it becomes available. Early reviews of the game have been phenomenal. They're saying it's just one of the best games in the God of War series, maybe the best God of War game, and that it really kind of shatters the mold of what those other games were. That it's pacing, its companionship with your son Atreus, the death of Kratos' wife and Atreus' mother kind of set them on this adventure to scatter or to fulfill her final wish. And that's kind of where the adventure starts. And apparently, it's just blowing people away. So again, as that comes a little closer, we'll get a full kind of review story on it up. But until then, one big thing that came out this week, and I am just super excited and stoked that this is going to be a reality, is the PS4, Xbox One, PC re-release of Shenmue 1 and 2. And if you're unfamiliar, Shenmue was an old Dreamcast game, came out way back in 1999, and at the time it was the most expensive game ever produced. But it puts you in the shoes of Ryu Hazuki, whose father gets murdered very early on in the game by a man named Lan Di, who leads a kind of like a mafia type, crime family. And Ryu just goes on a quest to hunt down the man who killed his father. And then, so it starts off and you're just kind of, you're investigating, you're asking some questions. It had so much customization. The combat system felt like a fighting game, but within an RPG game. And it also had you could talk to everybody. You could go and different houses. You could waste your whole day away playing video games in the arcade, or spend all your money on little machines that had toys in them, little capsule toys, and try to collect them all. It just had such a fun feel to it. And, so it starts off and it's very ordinary, but then you get swept up into this story of magic and this relic called the Dragon Mirror that can peer through time. And it became very anime, and the sequel initially was not released in America. It was released in Europe and Japan, and then later was released on the Xbox 360, I believe. And me personally, I'm a Sony man, and I have been for such a long time, that I never got to experience the sequel to Shenmue, and this re-release is going to be my first chance to experience it. Now, these games are not being remastered in any way. They are just being kind of smoothed out for, high-def TV a little bit. But other than that, they're going to be presented in their original format. And while I think, many of you out there probably have a groan at that because graphics can be so dated, the gameplay in this, put the graphics aside, the gameplay in these games is worth experiencing. And they are doing this because Shenmue 3 is finally going to come to us. I mean, it was a huge, successful Kickstarter, made its money within the first 24 hours, and then some. So that game is going to conclude Ryu Hazuki's story and his hunting down of Landee. But I really, really urge you to check out these games if you never got to pick up the first one and try it out on Dreamcast. I know many people did not pick up that system when it came out, and then the next year it very quickly got overshadowed by PlayStation 2 and Xbox. So the Dreamcast kind of came and went, but Shenmue and its, again, I've not played its sequel, but I've watched playthroughs, I've seen the gameplay, I've seen what the story is, and they're just phenomenal games, and I cannot wait to see what the next generation graphics and gameplay of this conclusion will bring to us, hopefully sometime in the next couple of years. But they are going to be re-released. There's not an official date yet, but it is happening, so keep your eyes out for that. Moving on over to the world of comic books, DC has announced a couple of things coming out of C2E2. One thing is that their variant covers, so what DC's been doing recently, as opposed to releasing incentive variant covers, what they've been doing is just releasing 2 covers for each book. One a primary main cover and one a variant cover. And they're kind of changing the format to put more focus on the art of the variant covers, which are often done by special artists or big names that are brought in to just kind of do a quick cover for the book. But so they, I kind of got to look at some of how it's going to look, and it definitely seems more like a Virgin variant. And if you're unfamiliar, a Virgin variant is a cover of a comic book that takes everything off of the cover except the art. So no logos, no UPC codes, no number, no anything, just the art. And it's a very kind of cool variant thing. And so these new DC variant covers are going to be more like that. All the logo and UPC information has been moved down to the bottom corner of the book, and most of the cover will be taken up by the art. Which, if you're a guy like me who likes art in comics and tends to hang his favorite covers on the wall, this will be an excellent chance to pick up some cool art from some really interesting artists. Also coming out of C2E2 from DC, so way back in Justice League number 50 and in the Rebirth number 1 special, during the Darkseid War leading up to Justice League number 50, Batman got to sit in the Mobius chair. And if you're unfamiliar, the Mobius chair is the chair that the Monitor sits in, and it allows him to see and know all. So Batman had access to all this information, and one of the questions that Batman asked the Mobius chair was the true identity of the Joker. And his reaction initially in Justice League number 50 didn't give us any information because the chair communicates with you telepathically, but Batman's reaction to that was just, no, that's not possible. And then we had to wait all the way till the Rebirth one-shot before we finally got some answers. But it turns out that there are actually 3 men within the DC universe going by the Joker. And this became kind of a big mystery, and Batman couldn't understand how he didn't know this for so long. He's got such a keen, inquisitive detective mind. But this is the truth. I mean, the Mobius chair does not lie. So that has been a mystery that has kind of remained, and we've seen a Joker popping up in Dark Knight's Metal. That is, the third incarnation of the Joker that had popped up during Snyder and Capullo's New 52 run, but this whole 3 Joker thing is still a mystery. Well, it looks like it's not going to be a mystery much longer. Jeff Johns, who's currently busy with Doomsday Clock and his kind of Watchmen story that he's doing, which will go on for 12 issues, and is only just recently released number 4, is supposed to take over writing this kind of mini series that will finally give us some answers to this Joker mystery. Apparently Jason Fabok is already working on art for this story. So it's going to be coming to us sooner rather than later. Once we get done with Doomsday Clock and Jeff Johns is freed up, it seems like that's going to be his next big project. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope that you are too. The mystery of the Jokers, is the Joker immortal, or has he just been fooling with Batman for so long? Have they ever worked together to mess with Batman? I mean, the how can there be more than one when we know the Joker to be a man who gets jealous of people who steal his shtick? All of these questions and more, I hope, will be answered when we finally get to see, Jeff Johns and Jason Fabok's mini-series about the 3 Jokers. Another thing coming out of DC from C2E2, Joelle Jones, who is a great artist who's worked with DC and Image and done some stuff for them, is going to be writing a new Catwoman series that is going to launch the same day as Batman 50, which is the wedding of Batman and Catwoman. So the first issue they talked about it at C2E2. Joelle Jones was there and kind of give some information. And apparently this is the first issue is going to show what Catwoman did on her wedding night. And then we'll just continue to spin out from there. The art looks fantastic for the couple of pages that they showed off at C2E2. And I am a fan of Catwoman. I like how Tom King, who's writing Batman currently, has made her kind of a more central character within the Batman story. And I hope that this new ongoing Catwoman will kind of continue that and leave her as an important part of this universe, because she has been such an important part of this universe for so long. And I think she often gets sidelined. So it'll be nice to see Catwoman get the spotlight again. And hopefully this new Joelle Jones series will continue, the good Catwoman stuff that we've had coming out of Rebirth. If you're a fan of Rick and Morty and you're also a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, man, I got good news for you, because IDW and Oni are going to be crossing over Rick and Morty and Dungeons and Dragons in a mini-series that's going to be coming out in August. So apparently the premise of this is that Rick and Morty get transported to a fantasy world and have to go on a classic D&D style adventure with all the humor of Rick and Morty. So Jim Zub is going to be working on the story, and he's been doing the D&D stuff recently, and he's just a fantastic, really funny guy who kind of just has a great time writing the D&D world and the fantasy of it. And I'm very excited to see Rick and Morty deal with something like this, especially in light of the fact that we might not be getting more Rick and Morty television for at least a year or so. If that. So, that is definitely something to look forward to in August from Oni Press and IDW. So that's going to bring us to the end. Man, it was a crazy couple of weeks. I'm sorry we missed you guys last week, but we get back at it this week, and we'll see you next week as well with more news. Just a couple of things to talk about before we get out of here. If you're local and you're listening to the show and you're digging what we're putting down, do me a favor. Come on out to Miniature Market on May the 20th. It's a Sunday. We're going to be doing board game demos all day of some of the games that Miniature Market has had on sale recently. So you get a chance to try out some games, hang out with us, and maybe, pick up a cheap game if you like it. And then early June, we're going to be launching the Kickstarter for Conniving Cooks. We're all very excited about this. We here at Entertain the Geeky and EG Games really believe in Conniving Cooks, and we are excited to bring it to you. So we're going to be keep an eye open in the future. We're going to be doing a launch event for that as well. Probably also at Miniature Market, we'll have copies of the game. You'll be able to try it out. And if you like it, well, we'll hope you donate some money. But if you're digging what we're doing here, do me a favor, go on over to entertainthegeeky.com. We got all the content there, the blog posts, the kind of news updates, all the shows. So Entertain the Geeky, Chris and Rogers podcast here, Nerd News, and mine, and Matt and Jeff's Board Game Bros. They are brothers. They like board games. They deconstruct board games. They talk about board games. They're great guys. Check their show out as well. If you want to chat with me, talk about the show, shoot me an email at etgnerdnews@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/entertainmentgeeky. If Twitter is your social media platform of choice, we're also over there at Entertain Geeky. We're also on Instagram at EntertainTheGeeky. So I'm going to see you guys next week, and until then, stay geeky.